Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling a big idea, one that many of us grew up with, the notion that science and our own inner experience are somehow on opposite teams. But what if that's not true? What if they're actually two sides of the very same coin?
You know the drill, right? We're often taught to put science and intuition in these completely separate boxes. In one corner, you have science. It's all about logic, hard data, measurements, and the external world. And in the other corner, you have intuition. That's your feelings, your personal experiences, your inner world. One is real, and the other is, well, it's fuzzy. But here's the question. Is that really the only way to see it? Is it a choice you have to make? Today, we're going to explore a growing movement that says, no way. It argues that these two aren't enemies at all. In fact, they're essential partners. And to get there, we have to look at where science even came from. According to something called the Conscious Science Manifesto, we've kind of lost the plot. The argument is that science wasn't born from some cold, detached calculation. It was born from a deep, profound, and very human sense of wonder. I mean, think about it. The questions that drive science are the most personal questions we can ask. Who am I? Where did I come from? These aren't just for some sterile lab. They're the questions that keep us up at night. The idea here is that all true discovery really begins from within. And that brings us to the core idea of what's being called conscious science. It suggests that our intuition and our emotional intelligence, they're not getting in the way of good logic. They're actually crucial tools. They're what helps us notice when something in the data just feels off. They're what lets us ask a truly creative question or spot a pattern no computer would ever see. Okay, so that's the big picture. But how does this actually play out in the real world? Especially when you're trying to study things that are, notoriously hard to pin down, like paranormal experiences. Well, it starts with being incredibly disciplined and grounded. This isn't about just believing everything you hear. It's about having a rigorous process. These kinds of interviewing techniques are all about building trust, asking the right questions, and documenting every last detail. The key here is that this isn't about throwing out the scientific toolkit. It's about making it bigger, to include human experience. And this approach actually has a name. It's called phenomenology. It sounds complicated, but the idea is simple. It's about being objective about subjective things. And this isn't just theory. Right now, researchers are using this very method to build a huge global database of poltergeist cases, trying to find patterns in thousands of first-hand accounts. And the ambition here is pretty huge. By collecting and comparing over 1,000 of these cases, the goal is to get past just one-off spooky stories. It's about building a real, data-driven picture of what's going on, so we can form new ideas based on actual collected facts, not just wild speculation. But here's the thing. When an entire area of human experience gets pushed to the margins like this, what happens to the people who are actually living through it? This isn't just some philosophical debate. It has a very real, very human cost. A study in clinical parapsychology found something pretty heartbreaking. People who have had what they call anomalous experiences, things they just can't explain, are often terrified to talk about them. Why? Because they're scared of being judged or, worse, labeled as mad. And you know what? That fear is often completely justified. That same study found that the vast majority of therapists feel totally unequipped to even have these conversations. Most of them have never received a single bit of training on how to handle these topics. It's a massive gap in our professional systems. So what happens is, when someone finally gets the courage to share their story, they often get shut down. Their entire worldview gets dismissed. And that can be incredibly damaging, not just to their trust in therapy, but to their overall mental health. This creates a really serious problem. If the mainstream services we have can't offer understanding or support, where do people go? It creates a desperate need for new kinds of spaces, places that can actually bridge this divide between personal experience and scientific understanding. Well, answering that very call is a nonprofit called the Conscious Pathways Institute, and it was founded by an educator and metaphysical scientist named Dr. Terri Proud. The whole point of the Institute is to create a safe home for these kinds of experiences. It was specifically set up to help people who feel misunderstood or even misdiagnosed by mainstream systems after having some kind of extraordinary encounter that just doesn't fit in the usual boxes. And Dr. Proud's work is really guided by this one core belief, which perfectly sums up the whole idea of conscious science, that rigorous, data-driven science and our deep, spiritual inner knowing aren't fighting each other. They're allies.
So, what does the Institute actually do? Well, it's a mix of a few really important things. It provides a safe community where people can actually share their stories without fear of judgment. At the same time, it's committed to doing grounded research and educating the public, trying to build that bridge between science and spirit. One of their most fascinating projects is a perfect example of how they blend these two worlds. It's called the Harmonic Intelligence Project, and it's looking into wild idea. Does energy itself have a kind of musical structure hidden inside it? The whole process is really cool. First, they use super-sensitive equipment to measure tiny electromagnetic fields in a room. Then, they take that raw data and convert it into sound frequencies you can actually hear. And finally, they analyze those sounds to see if there are harmonic patterns, the same kind of beautiful mathematical relationships you'd find in a piece of music. It's like they're using modern tech to investigate that ancient idea of the music of the spheres. So, when you look at the whole picture, this movement really isn't about creating some brand new radical system. It's actually about remembering a much older one, a more holistic way of looking at the world, where logic and intuition, the stuff we can measure and the stuff we can't, are all seen as part of the same unified search for truth. And that really leaves us with a pretty powerful question to think about. If we start to heal this artificial divide we've created, if we let our inner world of wonder and intuition guide our outer search for knowledge, just imagine what we might discover.